he decided to wrong-foot them. Morgan would land in Normandy. It was the beginning of a huge gamble on which the fate of hundreds of thousands of soldiers would depend. In the autumn of 1943, Allied photo-reconnaissance aircraft swept over the beaches of northern France. It was part of a huge planning operation for the seaborne invasion of Europe. The fortifications of the Atlantic Wall were monitored by the French resistance. Men crept ashore to collect sand samples to test whether armored vehicles could be landed. Northern France became the most reconnoitered coastline in the history of warfare. It soon became clear any landing would need some kind of port facilities. But the disaster at Dieppe had shown that it was too dangerous to attempt a direct assault on a German-occupied port. Britain's planners were forced to come up with an ingenious alternative. Giant, hollow concrete boxes were constructed in Britain that could later be towed to the French coast. There they would be sunk to form an artificial harbor. They were known by their code name, mulberries. The mulberries would be supplied with fuel by a pipeline unwound from giant reels and dropped on the seabed. It would run for 100 miles. The pumping station on the Isle of Wight was disguised as an ice cream parlor. But the raid on Dieppe had also revealed a second problem: how to get the first wave of troops off the beaches and through the German fortifications. The man told to solve that question was General Percy Hobart, one of the pioneers of armored warfare. Hobart came up with a series of ingenious devices. The troops called them the funnies. They included such extraordinary machines as flamethrowers and floating tanks. Flail tanks for clearing mines. The bobbin for laying firm paths across sand or shingle. An armored ramp for climbing sea walls. The fascine carrier for tackling ditches. And the bridging tank for wider obstacles. That left just one problem: how to stop the Germans rushing in overwhelming reinforcements before the Allies had established a foothold. The answer was to keep them guessing until the very last moment as to where the invasion would take place. Operation Bodyguard was a massive and complex deception campaign. German double agents in Britain now began sending back to Germany huge amounts of carefully coordinated false information. This emphasized that the main landings would be in the Pas-de-Calais, although a feint attack might be launched in Normandy. To muddy the waters still further, The Allied military created a fictitious army unit, the so-called 1st US Army Group, or FUSAG. It was stationed, very obviously, in Kent, bang opposite the Pas-de-Calais. The man in charge of it was the pistol-toting US General George Patton, who'd been removed from action in Sicily after slapping shell-shocked soldiers. Patton was rated by the Germans as the Allies' best attacking general. Just the man they expected to command the invasion of Western Europe.
Basher 5-2, this is Basher 1-1 on Alpha.
Radio transmissions mimicked the wireless traffic of an army. For the benefit of any Luftwaffe reconnaissance aircraft flying over Britain, the fields of Kent were filled with inflatable tanks and carefully faked track marks. There were dummy aircraft made of wood and canvas. Harbors along the Kent coast were filled with dummy landing craft. There were even troops, though these were in reality backup units. In late 1943, the Allies appointed US General Dwight Eisenhower as Supreme Allied Commander for the invasion of Europe. British General Bernard Montgomery would be in overall command of the initial assault troops. D-Day was fixed for June the 5th, 1944. Two months before the landing, Eisenhower launched an elaborate air offensive to disrupt German links to the coast. Once again, it was carefully planned to give the impression the Allies' target was the Pas-de-Calais region. As the date of the invasion approached, Allied troop numbers in England reached over 2 million. They were supported by more than 3,000 tanks and 12,000 aircraft. The Germans were well aware an invasion was imminent. But they had been completely taken in by the Allies' phony preparations in Kent and were convinced the most likely landing spot was the Pas-de-Calais. Everything seemed to be going the Allies' way. The troops were briefed. Then the weather turned against them. Rain lashed down, visibility was poor, and the channel was stormy. Nevertheless, on June the 4th, 1944, the assault troops boarded their landing ships and the armada of more than 5,000 vessels set sail. But the rain continued to lash down, and later that day the invasion had to be postponed. The ships returned to port, and the assault troops faced a nerve-shredding wait. Early the next morning, the military leadership met again. The naval commanders were keen to go ahead. But the air chiefs were doubtful. They worried the visibility would still be too poor to provide effective air support. After a long silence, Eisenhower looked up. "Let's go," he said.